Charles Junor was an Australian writer and journalist. Born in or around 1864, Sydney Evening News claims he was a native of South America. He began publishing in Australian papers about 1890, living and working in Melbourne before moving to Sydney in the late 1890s. The autobiography of Australian poet and novelist Randolph Bedford, 0-33, says that Junor worked as parliamentary secretary to William Maloney. After moving to Sydney, he worked at Sydney University as assistant secretary for the Australasian Association for the Advancement of Science. He died in 1901, drowning when he fell off a ferry on its way to Milson's Point. At some time, he married a woman named Minnie, who, after his death, opened a bookshop and remarried in 1904. Dead Men's Tales, Junor's first book, came out in 1898, collecting many of the stories previously published in various magazines and newspapers. His second book, Richard Bryce, Adventurer, the story of an Australian raised in Argentina who has to go on the lam after his involvement with a coup attempt, was published posthumously in 1902. Dead Men's Tales is a mixed collection of stories ranging from moralisms to short adventure yarns, and occasional attempts at satire. Not to give the game away too soon, but one should remark that the collection is actually dedicated to H. Rider Haggard, the writer perhaps slightly overestimating his own writing ability. The title story begins with a traveller discovering two corpses picked clean in the Australian bush, with one of them holding on for dear life to a pocketbook. The pocketbook reveals the story of Tweed and Retford's search for a gold mine in the bush, inhabited solely by the Aboriginals, the two initially brought to near ruin by the accidental poisoning of their horses, leaving them to wander through the bush on foot. The story then changes perspective and time period, and relates the tale of Baird, an explorer who is taken prisoner by a tribe of cannibal natives who hail him as a god and give him a wife, despite the ease with which they knocked him out cold with a boomerang prior. Some time later, a plague starts to decimate the community, who decide to hoof it overnight, leaving Baird and his wife behind. Baird then sends her off to dive into a pool, thinking it may contain gold, but she never reappears. At around this time, Baird meets Retford and Tweed, and the three begin a gold mining enterprise. Retford wishes to examine the pool, and when he does, something grabs him and nearly mauls him too. Just as they are about to pack up, they notice Baird has a few screws loose, before he suddenly tries to suck their blood when it's revealed he's a leper, getting shot for his troubles. The two remaining prospectors make their way through the bush, but given the traveller's discovery at the beginning of the tale, one need not hold their breath in anticipation of a happy ending. What follows is mostly a mixed collection of tales of varying quality. I have left out the descriptions of some of the shorter stories that didn't leave much of an impression. Up-to-Date Burglars is a somewhat frustrating affair of a husband-wife pair of criminals committing crimes via hypnotism, and them easily dispatching the policeman who managed to trace their misdeeds to its rightful source. Finley's courtship concerns a man who abandons his courtship of a woman after she loses both legs in a railway accident. A celestial burglar has a hotel visitor almost shoot a Chinese hotel attendant because he thinks the Chinese man is going to come kill and rob him during the night. Her funeral is the story of a drunk fresh widower who manages to accidentally pitch his wife's coffin into a pool due to being stone drunk. The Silent Sepulchre, the second best story of the collection, has Victor Russell inform his friend Musgrave about the arrangements he has made in case he were to be entombed alive in the family sepulchre, due to his pre-existing condition. But though Russell at one point falls unconscious and is identified as being dead, Musgrave knows he is not, and so he decides to let Russell die so he could muscle in on his territory with a certain Miss Travers. But he gets struck by a tram and has a concussion from which he awakes 3 months later. Visiting Russell's tomb, he finds it empty, as Russell had actually gotten out before and went off to seek a nerve specialist. Musgrave becomes imprisoned in the mausoleum and is only discovered several days later after he was mauled to death by a dog. A Lion's Story is the tale of a count's daughter, her tragic romance, and her training to become a famous lion tamer. His queen's birthday is a bit of a bizarre yarn of a man apparently dreaming he saw Queen Victoria at Melbourne, along with Napoleon III's son, Napoleon Prince Imperial, who also happened to be dead at the time. A Terror for Drink is the tragic story of an old shepherd who is always forced to stay on as the shepherd to McAllister by virtue of him conspiring with the innkeeper to have the man drink away his whole several months' wage, since no one else would tend to McAllister's sheep. Our Easter Monday concerns a chap and his Mabel being menaced by the ghost of an Indian man after the man accidentally stirs his tea with the dead Indian's discarded forearm. The Genius of the Glass concerns an invention that can scan the thoughts from even the brain of a dead man. The inventor uses it to scan the mind of a dead drunkard who, it turns out, was beset by a quite literal spirit of alcohol abuse, his own near relation, who wished to corrupt him and bring him to a violent end. How the curse was sped is the story of a curse laid on a poor working-class family enacted via a gas explosion due to stealing from the gas company. Two Dreams is a bit of a pointless story of two brothers having a shared dream about a military officer committing a murder but getting told to bugger off when they try to protest that this evidence was not used to charge the officer with a crime. The title story is certainly the most interesting, and some of the others have interesting ideas surfacing occasionally, but a lot of the material is a bit underwhelming, and the overall writing quality leaves a lot to be desired.